Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be covering all 10 remembrances in the DLC and powerful builds, overpowered builds in Elden Ring to take on each one. Each of the 10 remembrances in Shadow of the Erdtree, we're going to be going over and making your life a lot easier. I decided to not do a cool intro where I show off all the bosses going down. Some of them go down really fast, others take a little bit longer, but I wanted to keep it in the spoiler order that they appear. So this is in the order that they may appear throughout finding them in Shadow of the Erdtree. This is 10 builds for 10 bosses. And the first one we have up here is Rellana. Rellana is probably the first boss you're going to run into, that or Divine Beast. By the way, I am going to have more Scadutree fragments than you. This is the second run through DLC on this character. However, if you only have around 5 or so when facing the first boss, it's not a big deal because the early ones do a lot more now since the patch. These are also the strategies I used for the first run for the most part. Aside from with the first run, I did use summons. I used Mimic to help me and whatnot because I wanted to learn their movesets. In this video, though, we'll be soloing all 10 Remembrance bosses, and we'll also be taking down the big dragon as well. So Rellana has decent resistances, so I went for the Blasphemous Blade to stay healing the entire time. She's really aggressive and relatively fast, so the Blasphemous Blade's going to work to your advantage with that. She can sidestep it, but it's going to keep you healed the entire time and keep you alive throughout the fight. You can actually jump those. I think you may even be able to roll dodge them. I'm just not great at it. But even seeing me, myself being an average gamer, obviously the name implies that as far as these bosses go, these strategies are going to help you. So if you're just decent in Elden Ring, if you're just okay at it, you'll be able to use these strategies to solo the bosses without using summons, which is going to be a huge help for you. This is going to be a huge help in taking these bosses down. I recommend the Blasphemous Blade and this specific build for Rellana. We're going to go over equipment stats for every single one, and we're going to start with the first one here now. And for equipment, we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10. We have the Giant Seal. We're just using that for buffs. We hit 51 poise here. We have the Fire Scorpion Charm, Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Talisman of the Dread, Flame Tier, and the Faith Tier 2. And for stats on this build, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 23 Endurance, 22 Strength. We have 15 Dexterity. We're all the way up at 80 Faith, so you can run a bunch of incantations if you want to do that too. For our buffs, we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Rebuke to add an additional 40% damage. And the next one up here is the Divine Beast. Now, technically speaking, the Blasphemous Blade destroys the Divine Beast. You could use the exact same build for the first boss in Rellana and destroy the Divine Beast quickly because he has 0 fire resistance. However, I wanted to change it up, so I used the Great Backhand Blades in Flame Art Affinity. Yeah, you'd get about 5,000 damage with the Blasphemous Blade with just 5 Scadutree upgrades. Of course, I'm way later here, so I would probably be getting around 7,000 or 8,000 damage. But with the Backhand Blades early on too, if you use Flame Art Affinity, the fire damage part's the big deal here. He has 0 resistance against fire, so any fire builds will destroy him quickly. So another option for you could be Burno Flame. That'd be a great one too. I believe in terms of physical damage, the best one I think might be Pierce damage. I'm not 100% certain on that. As far as damage types in terms of physical damage, though, he's not highly resistant to anything in specific, so you could pretty much use any physical damage builds for good damage also. Overall, I don't think you're going to have too much trouble with the Divine Beast compared to some of the other bosses in the DLC. He's kind of erratic. He flies up in the air often. Yeah, he's got a little bit of an annoying moveset, but keep in mind, he does not have a ton of HP and all around takes good damage from the majority of builds. He's not too bad to take down. All right, in a second here, we're going to go over equipment stats, everything you need to know. Keep in mind, some of the later bosses have a lot more HP. The Divine Beast isn't too bad. He's a nice early challenge for you. I recommend taking on this boss relatively early in the game. We have the Flame Art Backhand Blades, plus 25 preferably. Any seal for buffs, we hit 51 poise. We have Melissa's Prosthesis, Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Wing Sword Insignia or Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Thorny Tier, and Faith Tier 2. For our stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 30 Endurance, 15 Strength, 20 Dexterity. We have 80 Faith here. Again, we went all the way up with Faith because you really don't have to respec for a lot of these. I did a lot with Faith. Faith is very versatile. We're using Golden Vow and Hellish Rebuke again here. If you don't want to take the extra damage, another alternative body buff that you could use is Flame Grant Me Strength to get a lot of damage out of that since we're doing both fire and physical damage as well. While not a Remembrance boss, I'm going to show off the Hippo real quick, what you could do to take down the Hippo really fast. The Hippo is in water, and if you dodge the initial bite attack, charge up Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, and generally speaking, it's just going to be one shot, one single cast of lightning with just using Golden Vow, Halash and the Jellyfish Shield to take down the Hippo easily. Yeah, that is not a tough boss by any means. By the way, spoiler warning here, the next one I'm going to show is going to be Messmer. We have Gravelstone, Seal plus 25. We have the Jellyfish Shield. We hit 51 poise here. We have the Lightning Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Godfrey Icon. We have the Lightning Tier and Fate Tier 2. And for stats on this one, we're going to jump into stats now for this build. We also have 80 Faith. Again, nothing changed here. We're able to take down the Hippo in a single cast of Red Lightning. Only took one try, by the way. 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 23 Endurance. We have 22 Strength, because that way you could use the Blasphemous Blade if you need to as well. And then we have Golden Vow, Halash, of course. We're using the Jellyfish Shield. And of course, we're using Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. He's in water. Just use this. He's a big target. And next up here, we have Messmer, which could be a very difficult boss. So for this, we're going to change up our build a little bit. We're going to use Blood Fiend's Arm, of course, in Blood Affinity. And then we're going to use Endure so we could just tank his attacks for the most part. And then follow up with Charged R2s, or right trigger if you're on Xbox, to posture break him as much as we can. This actually turns into an absolute beatdown because this weapon is really broken. Blood Fiend's Arm is very broken. In Blood Affinity, you're going to get a lot of damage. You're going to get good bleed buildup, some bleed procs, and of course the posture damage here is a huge bonus. And with Endure, we can tank a lot of his attacks very easily. I'm going to show off a Faith version of this build later in the video for another boss, but for this one, I recommend Blood Affinity. I feel like it's good here. The couple of bleed procs you can get that obviously hit there to end the boss fight against Messmer, and then the posture damage. It makes for a good combination to take Messmer down quickly. Only took a couple tries for him, not too bad. We're going to jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know. And we have Blood Fiend's Arm and Blood Affinity. We're using Endure, of course. We have the Dragon Communion Seal. We have 69 poise here, so not a lot of issues there. Axe Talisman, Two-Handed Sword Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Arsenal Charm +1 for the weight, or Great Jar's Arsenal, Spike Crack Tier, and Fate Tier 2. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, we have 28 Endurance, we have 40 Strength. That's going to be 60 when we're two-handed because you get that 1.5 times two-handed bonus with Strength builds. We have 45 Arcane for that nice bleed soft cap, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And then we're going to be using Golden Bow and Flame Grant Strength for this build, and this could beat down a lot of the bosses in the game. Messmer is very easy with this setup. And the next one up here we have is the Putrescent Knight, if that's how you say that. Putrescent. I really have no idea how to say it. Some of these words I just can't pronounce. I'm just really bad at pronouncing. But anyway, he's extremely weak to holy damage, so big bonus there. He takes 20% additional holy damage, so we're going to be using the Black Knife here. Yeah, I figured out when I was first facing this boss how much holy damage he takes. It's really incredible the amount of damage you can get from a lot of different holy builds. Sacred Blade is another one, though for me, I find the Black Knife more effective. And once again, running another powerful Faith build here, getting around 5,000-6,000 damage per hit. Even if you have less Scadutree Fragment upgrades, it's around 4,000 damage or so per use of the Ash of War on the Black Knife. This is one of the best options to face him with. As somebody, as you can see, that's not really great at dodging things, especially as I'm learning these bosses. This is the first time I'm soloing most of these, by the way. Since my first two runs, I use a mix of summons and solos, depending how difficult the boss was. Yeah, so I'm getting used to the movesets and whatnot as well. And of course, I'm taking a little more damage than expected. But he only took around 4 or 5 tries, and the Black Knife absolutely shredded him. Yeah, as far as the Black Knife, 10 out of 10 here, recommended. I believe it's one of the best holy builds that you could take into this specific boss fight because the odds are you're not going to miss him with it much. And if you use Halash early on, it's probably going to take you between 3 and 5 uses of the Ash of War to get him to phase transition. And after that, he becomes essentially, he's behind, you're ahead as he's trying to play catch up and phasing and all that. And then you could just do a lot of damage and quicken the fight. Yeah, it's certainly one way to make this fight easier. If you're having difficulty with that fight, keep in mind, takes additional holy damage. A nice holy faith build could take down this boss fast. The only status effect he'll take, by the way, is Rot. We have the Black Knife, preferably +10. We're using the Erdtree seal. We hit 51 poise here. For our talismans, we have the Phlox Canvas Talisman, we have the Shard of Alexander, we have the Ritual Swords Talisman, Sacred Scorpion Charm, and then we have the Holy Tier and Faith Tier 2. Well, for stats, guess what? We're a Faith build again. Guess what? Because Faith is amazing. It's amazing in the DLC. It truly is. We have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, 20 Strength. We have 15 Dexterity. We have 80 Faith with the Faith tier. And then we have Golden Vow, Halishabriri, and Multi-Layered Ring of Light also does a lot of damage if you can land it on him. Yeah, so for the next solo strategy here, not technically a Remembrance, but you're probably going to want Bayle's Heart. After all, we're going to go over the big dragon and how to take them down, and there's a specific way of doing this for me. I like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike in the first phase. However, my strategy is different for the second phase. I'll explain that as we go here. And for Phase 1, Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike is very reasonable. You don't have to overbuff it or anything like that. You could just use Golden Vow and Jellyfish Shield. If you want to add in Howl, that's up to you. If you don't want the increase in damage, not a big deal. He's a large target, so he's going to take decent damage from it. Get a couple casts, 2 or 3 in the first phase, and he will phase transition. Alright, now for Phase 2, we're going to ditch Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. That's not going to be that great unless you hyper buff it at the door or something like that, and if you're going for one shot, but there's a lot of RNG behind that. For Phase 2, we're going to leave the RNG behind. We're going to switch to Pest Thread Spears, which absolutely shreds him and is a little bit quicker for us to use. The concept here is simple. If you have time to charge it, charge it. If you don't have time to charge it, use it anyway, because on charge, it's going to do between 2,000 and 4,000 damage. If you're able to charge it, you can get up to 10,000 damage with Pest Thread Spears. It truly is an incredible incantation. Yeah, so the basics there is you don't have to charge it. It's chargeable. It's a chargeable incantation, but you don't have to. You can still get decent damage out of it, but if you do have time, charge it. Unlike Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, where it's really weak if you don't charge it, Pest Thread Spears does great all around. We have the Gravelstone Seal plus 25. We have the Jellyfish Shield. We have 51 poise here. And we have the Ritual Swords Talisman. We have the Godfrey Icon. We also have Phlox Canvas Talisman, the Bolt Drake Talisman plus 1. There's an upgraded version of that one you could use. Lightning tier and Faith tier 2. One thing to mention as a quick tip is, despite it being Flame Lightning, it seems to do mostly lightning damage, so if you can get your lightning resistance up, that'll help in this fight. We have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, we have 20 Strength, we have 80 Faith again here, another Faith build. We're using Golden Vow, Halishabriri, and a combination of Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike and Pest Thread Spears. I have no doubt if you're having trouble with this boss, this strategy will take him down. Alright, next up here we have the most bullshit boss fight in the entire Souls genre. I really can't think of anything other than the Bed of Chaos. This boss is absolutely awful in Commander Gaius. Honestly, I feel like it's terrible, to be honest. And I'm going to show you a strategy how to take him down fast, but this boss fight is just ridiculous. Sorry, I know I'm usually friendlier with the language, but that's just how I feel about this boss. Every once in a while, we have to say how we feel about something, and I feel like this boss is terrible by design. Almost no wind-up on his charge. It's terrible. It could literally hit you 3 times, by the way. If you block it, it could drain your stamina and break you. If you don't block it, it can 3-hit you somehow, and also has an invisible hitbox. Yeah, his charge is probably one of the worst moves I've ever seen. I know you're supposed to fight him on Torrent, but it's pretty awful on Torrent as well. There's nothing good about this boss fight. I love 9 out of the 10 bosses in DLC. This is not one of them. I feel like if I go back through DLC, I'm going to fight this boss as little as possible. His back legs also has a kick, again, with nearly no indicator of when he's going to use it. So if you go behind him, you're not exactly safe either. For this specific build, we're going to be using a shield to block the charged hits, and then we're going to be casting Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike because he has 0 lightning resistance. Let's jump into equipment. We have the Gravelstone Seal plus 25. We have the Blacksteel Great Shield plus 25. We hit 51 poise here. Ritual Swords Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Phlox Canvas Talisman, Lightning Scorpion Charm, Lightning tier, and Faith tier 2. Let's jump into stats for our build. Seriously, this guy doesn't even have his own soundtrack. I'm pretty sure they just used another soundtrack for this boss fight. I don't get it. I really don't get this boss at all. I'm not sure what they were going for here, but we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance. We have 35 Strength, 60 Faith with the Faith tier. And then we're going to be using Golden Vow and then Halishabriri, of course, to boost our lightning damage, and Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. Just block with the shield, always when he charges, and then cast Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike after. Yeah, good luck with that one. We are now on to the Scadutree Avatar. Yeah, we're going to use a shield here as well. This is going to be a different version of the Blasphemous Blade build. I end up getting greedy here, but the concept here is simple. The Black Steel Great Shield has incredible holy resistance, so it's actually great in a fight like this where you're mainly dealing with holy damage. If you want to block his attacks, both physical and holy, you're going to get a little bit of bleed build up on you in terms of the thorns, and then follow up and use the Blasphemous Blade. You can keep healing along the way too. So that's the whole concept here, and it took me all of 2 tries. I got really greedy here, and normally I mean, I do play greedy sometimes, but my recommendation is, at least for me, I probably should have been blocking more with the shield, because the holy attacks, the physical attacks, you're just going to really take chip damage, even if you're not using Scholar's Shield, and then, of course, using the Blasphemous Blade to get as much fire damage, because he takes 40% more fire damage. That's right, the Scadutree Avatar, if that's how you say that. I'm probably not saying the word Scadutree right, but a lot of us are probably saying it wrong. As far as his resistances go, same as all the other tree avatars in the game, I believe. Pretty good elemental resistances, besides fire, which he takes additional damage, and then physical damage isn't bad on them either, but because the difference between fire and all the other elementals is so, I mean, there's so much between any other elemental or physical type damage and then the 40% extra fire damage, I recommend no matter what to use a fire build on him. Fire build, and yeah, no matter what, pretty much anything with fire, and you can't go wrong here. Once again, you can use Burn O Flame too if you're able to land it on him. It may be a little bit difficult though, because of a lot of his attacks I noticed can hit directly under him, which can be a little bit of a challenge. Keep in mind, he speeds up as his phase transitions go on, so phase 1 is really slow, phase 2 is faster, and then phase 3 is the fastest with a lot of AoE attacks. And that's when you could use the Black Steel Great Shield. That was the point here. It has very high holy resistance. If you have the intelligence for it and you add Scholar's Shield, you could actually get 95% plus elemental resistances in terms of holy. It's pretty amazing for that. I should have been able to take advantage of this moment where he actually gets stunned. And the other thing is, if you hit him in the head, you get even more damage, probably like twice your normal damage. And if you're using fire, it absolutely destroys him. Yeah, and then the elemental resistances, again, on that shield, the Black Steel Great Shield having very good holy resistance. If you're able to put that up even for his AoE attacks, if you don't get guard broken, you'll be able to take a lot of those hits. I just got greedy with this for some reason. It only took 2 tries, but I recommend going more for the shield and heal, taking the fight a little bit slower, and I believe you're going to take him down with this strategy, no issue whatsoever. Let's jump into equipment and stats. For a shield and heal build, we have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10. We have the Black Steel Great Shield plus 25. We have the Erdtree Seal here. We hit 51 poise. Arsenal Charm plus 1 or Great Jar's Arsenal if you have it. Shard of Alexander. Talisman of the Dread. We have the Ritual Sword Talisman, but you're better off using the Fire Scorpion Charm here. Flame Tier and Faith Tier too. And then for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance. We have 35 Strength, that's for our shield. We have 50 Faith. I believe we get to 60 with the Faith tier, so that's pretty solid there in terms of damage from the Blasphemous Blade's Ash of War, which scales entirely with your Faith stat. Then we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. I mix in Flame Grant Me Strength here when I don't want to take additional damage, because Hellish Fury will do that, but typically Howl's a little better, and it'll last 10 seconds longer as well. Alright, next up here we have Midra. This is a really cool boss fight, but we are going to cheese it a little bit because we're going to use Blood Fiend's Arm, and we're going to use it in Sacred Affinity because he also takes reasonable holy damage, and he has relatively low poise too, so we're going to end up using Prayerful Strike Ash of War. Now that's going to give us posture damage, and it's going to continuously heal us as we use this Ash of War. You could essentially trade a lot of the hits with him by using this because the healing is comparable to the Blasphemous Blade. Actually, Prayerful Strike is one of the most broken builds in DLC because you could trade with a lot of the bosses. You could use this on Messmer and several of the other bosses that have a little bit lower poise. I wouldn't recommend taking on the big dragon with a build like this, but for any of these ones, it just ends up turning into a beatdown. This is New Game Plus Journey 2, so they have decent poise, not maxed out or anything. It goes up with each journey up until Journey 8. But even so, we're able to posture break him in 2 to 3 hits each time with Prayerful Strike and take down Midra fast. We're going to jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know for this build. And we have Bloodfiend's Arm and Sacred Affinity with Prayerful Strike on it. We have the Erdtree Seal +10. We are using the Silver Tier Mask to hit the minimum requirements on the weapon. Arsenal Charm +1 or Great Jar's Arsenal, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Crimson Seed, Talisman +1, Holy Tier, and Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, we have 20 Strength. We are Faith build again, so we're all the way up at 80 Faith. We have 15 Dexterity as well. We have 17 Arcane with the Silver Tier Mask so that we can hit the requirements for Bloodfiend's Arm. Then we're going to be using Golden Vow, Hellish Abriri. By the way, multi-layered Ring of Light also works for this boss. Pest Threads isn't bad either, despite the fact that this boss is small. I think that incantation is just a little bit broken, but go with Prayerful Strike. This is solid for this boss. And next one up here, after we're going to talk about broken builds, we're going to use a combination of Pest Thread Spears and Burno Flame for this boss, because both do great damage here. I did mess up and not have the Flame Tier. I had the Holy Tier by accident for this build, but if you use Burno Flame on this boss, Mother of Fingers, you could do a lot of damage, and Pest Threads absolutely shreds her. Another broken build is if you have time for it. I've been told Meteorite of Astal absolutely destroys her too, given her size. It'll just take her down really fast. That's another broken build you could use. There's a lot of different ones that you could use, but mainly another one here is big target damage. Any big target damage type thing will work well on the Mother of Fingers, but for me, Pest Threads is definitely the most damaging, no question about it. And had I had the Flame Tier, I would have gotten a little bit more damage out of Burno Flame, which also works really well on her too. Yeah, I think she took me around 3 tries in total. This is not an incredibly difficult boss compared to some of the other bosses that are in DLC. Has a lot of AoE attacks and stuff like that, but she's relatively slow. Her attacks are very well telegraphed for the most part too. It's nothing like the Commander boss. This isn't too bad here. I believe with using a build like this one, you'll be able to get her in a couple tries, no question about it. Alright, we're going to jump into equipment stats, everything you need to know for this build, and then continue on with some of the late game mandatory bosses. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Erdtree Seal +10, we have the Giant Seal 2, we have the Jellyfish Shield. We hit 61 poise here. You only need 51 for the first threshold. Ritual Swords Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, we have the Godfrey Icon, we have Flox Canvas Talisman, and then that was meant to be the Flame Tier and Fate Tier 2. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this one, we have 60 Vigor, we have 21 Mind, 25 Endurance. Again, we're a Faith build. Faith crushes the DLC. We have 80 Faith, of course, only 15 Dexterity. Don't need too much there. And then we're using Golden Vow for that additional 15% attack and defense. We're using Hellish Abriri to increase our generic damage by 25%. We are using Pest Thread Spears and Burno Flame as well to take down the Mother of Fingers. Also want to mention, if you're this far in the video and you haven't hit the sub button, be sure to hit that subscribe button if this video is helping you. We're going to jump into the next boss now. And what do you know? We're going to go Strength and Faith for Romina, Saint of Bud. We are going to use the Broken Anvil Hammer. This weapon is amazing. It's a phenomenal Strength and Faith weapon. I feel like it's very underrated. It does massive posture damage with its charged hits. You don't even really need to use the Ash of War much, and it does fire and physical damage. And this boss only took a total of 2 tries, and the reason for that is because the Anvil Hammer does so much damage to her. It really is a great option for her. She takes additional fire damage too, good physical damage from the weapon. We can continue to posture break her too, which helps us significantly in this fight. And I like this playstyle too. I like the fact that this is a very good Strength and Faith weapon. They gave us a really good Strength and Faith weapon for DLC. A lot of cool Faith stuff. I feel like mages, they didn't give you as much, although magic was kind of always overpowered to begin with, but there's definitely less magical stuff, let's put it that way, in Elden Ring's DLC Shadow of the Erdtree compared to the incantations and weapons we got that are faith-based. There's a lot of options there. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And we have the Anvil Hammer, preferably +10. We had it only +9. We have the Erdtree Seal. We have 62 poise there. Axe Talisman. Two-handed Sword Talisman. We have the Fire Scorpion Charm for the fire damage. Arsenal Charm +1 or Great Jar's Arsenal if you have it. Spike Crack Tier and Faith Tier 2. And for stats on this build, we have 60 Vigor, we have 16 Mind, 27 Endurance, 54 Strength. That'll get you to 80 when you two-hand this. We have 50 Faith with the Faith here. You need 11 Intelligence for some reason to wield this weapon. We have 12 Dexterity. And then for our buffs, we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for this one. Now, this is mandatory, I believe, so I'm going to show the NPCs real quick, but I just used the Blasphemous Blade for these guys. It's not too challenging overall. It doesn't have the knockback it used to, but it doesn't matter because they could run up to you and you could essentially trade hits all the time with it. It's amazing. The healing on it is truly phenomenal. Even though I do get beat up a little bit here because I was trying to use a Starlight Shard there because I forgot to change my flask over and give myself more FP. I made a mistake there, and then as I was using it, I tried to cancel it out, but I guess you can't, so I was just stuck trying to use the Starlight Shard, but it doesn't matter in the end. I still end up being victorious. This fight is not too challenging overall with the Blasphemous Blade. Couple things to note here real quick as you're seeing me absolutely beat this fight with the Blasphemous Blade simply by tanking hits, by the way. We're going to show the final boss here soon. I'm not going to show the build or stats for this one. I feel like it's kind of overkill because we already went over the Blasphemous Blade pretty much twice with and without a shield. So you can kind of have an idea on how you want to build it for this fight specifically. More important to the point, the final boss is about to appear on screen. Spoiler warnings ahead. I've marked it in the timestamps as final boss. Here we go now. And we're jumping into the final boss now. Promise Concert Radahn is the final boss. I'm not really sure about the lore here. I still don't know how it entirely makes sense, but I enjoyed the boss fight nonetheless. Unlike the Commander, I think it's a very good boss fight. There are two strategies here. Strategy 1, you could be really good at Souls games, which is not me, and you could end up rolling a lot of his attacks in the second phase need perfect time dodges. I mean, literally has to be pretty much to perfection. Or you have option 2. You could use a shield poke. You could also parry this boss, although that lands kind of with the first one where it's going to be really difficult to do. But a shield poke build with Scholar's Shield, and particularly Bleed and Rot, which Radahn is weak to, is perfect for this. I know that was a lot to go through, but that is the truth about this boss. There's a couple ways to play this. You could either have excellence in your parries and perfect time dodges, or you could go with the shield poke, use Rot to your advantage as his HP will tick down with Rot, and then he's relatively weak to bleed too, so if you use the Anspear Rapier, you could use it as a thrusting weapon that you could actually stand behind a shield. I'm using the Blacksteel Great Shield here with Scholar's Shield, and continue to poke him to build up Rot. He's already rotted here. And you're going to try to get him with it in the second phase too, and then of course get bleed procs as well. Basically, that's the concept here. I'm using the Blacksteel Great Shield because I don't really like the Fingerprint Shield because of the requirements at 150. It's really heavy for one, and on top of that, it requires 48 strength to use. This is only 35. It's also a little bit too easy to use, and you could rarely be guard broken, so I like having a little bit of a challenge here using the Blacksteel Great Shield. The other advantage is we do have more holy resistance with this shield. We could take more holy damage, as with Scholar's Shield, it's probably around a 95% plus in terms of your holy defense. I know many of you are struggling with this boss. You are going to struggle with this boss. Look at that moveset that just happened on screen. It's an absolute spectacle. It's meant to be one of, if not the hardest boss that basically From Software's ever made in all of the Souls games. And I believe it's right there with Ishin as well as Orphan of Kos 2. You could throw that in there as well. I also believe Gale and Metyr are relatively tough, but not nearly this tough. Concert Radahn really wants you to be excellent as a player, or possibly be a little bit cheesy with a shield. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to continue to poke at Radahn, and this didn't take too many tries. Once I grabbed the Anspear Rapier, I decided to look up and see what he was weak to, or get a better idea of what he was weak to, and it turns out, just like regular Radahn, Rot and Bleed is a good effective strategy. This is one of the few weapons, I think probably possibly the only weapon you can get both on. So if you're struggling, use this strategy. I have no doubt in my mind you'll be able to take down this boss quick, and if you're struggling even more than this, then you should probably grab the Fingerprint Shield, and then you'll be able to pretty much block everything. Try not to get grabbed, by the way. That puts a marker on you. The second time he grabs you will automatically kill you. The first one doesn't do any damage whatsoever. However, if he grabs you once, the second grab, I believe, is an automatic death. Yeah, pretty crazy boss fight overall. There's so much going on throughout the fight. You're going to see here, by the way, without Scholar Shield even on, look at the holy damage that I took with my guard up there. This shield is really excellent for that holy resistance part. He does a lot of holy damage, and you've got a great shield, quite literally, to block the holy damage that Radahn puts out. And honestly, I think it took me a total of just 8 or 9 tries once I switched to this strategy. It took me 40 minutes in total, but I tried a whole bunch of different combinations of different things, and the best option is, if you're not able to roll through his second phase attacks or parry him, which is relatively difficult, is just to go with the shield poke build. And then of course here he has the Rot on him, so his health is continuously ticking down, making our lives easier. And yeah, I got beat up, no question about it. If you use the fingerprint shield, you're going to take less damage than I did here. But again, I wanted to use this shield, a little bit of a challenge, and then having that holy resistance too. It ended up being, of course, always a challenging fight with Radahn here. The first 2 times I fought him, I used a summon. Struggled with him a lot the first time, even with a summon. This went much smoother. I recommend this build for sure. If you're struggling with this boss, pick up the Anspear Rapier, pick up the Black Steel Great Shield, and of course make sure you have Scholar Shield too. Let's jump to equipment. We have the Anspear Rapier plus 24. We have Blood Affinity Repeating Thrust. We have any staff or Scholar Shield that you could use. We have the Black Steel Great Shield. We have Dragon Communion Shield. We hit 51 poise. Arsenal Charm plus 1. Pearl Shield Talisman. We have the Great Shield Talisman, Crimson Seed Talisman plus 1. We have the Intelligence tier so that we could use Scholar Shield. If you have the requirements, it's only 12, then you don't need, you could use any other tier for that one. And we have a Green Burst Crystal tier for stamina regen. Let's talk about stats. We have 60 Vigor, 15 Mind, 30 Endurance, 35 Strength for the Great Shield. We have 20 Dexterity, 16 Faith, and 45 Arcane because we have the Circlet of Light on, which adds some stats. Then we're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Scholar Shield as our buffs. You can actually cast Golden Vow with the Faith tier, rest at the Site of Grace that's right before the arena, and then switch it to the Intelligence tier if need be, and Golden Vow will stay active when you go into the fight. Thanks for watching this one. This video had a lot of content in it. There was a lot to go through in this one, a lot of bosses to go through. Everything's time-stamped, by the way. Be sure to sub. If you're not subbed to this channel, we're going to be covering Elden Ring like crazy. Still a lot more builds to come. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree has been an amazing experience. It's 11 out of 10 for me, 9 out of 10 on the bosses minus the 1. Have a wonderful day.